Hey folks, it's Lachlan here again, speaking to you as always from just outside of the coastal city of Durban, South Africa. And today I've just got a lot of thoughts on my mind that I'd like to express in a kind of stream of consciousness format. I don't have a script, I don't have a specific point I want to make. There's just a lot of stuff on my mind that I want to talk about. Let's get the usual stuff out of the way first, shall we? If you've never seen me before, I was born with a disability known as quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which confines me to a wheelchair and affects the way I move and speak, among other things. So, if you can't tolerate the way in which I speak, or if the way my body moves is just too disturbing for you to handle, then by all means, go watch some girl dancing on TikTok or something. And don't waste my time telling me to speak properly or asking me what's wrong, because I've just told you. Secondly, I'm a journalist and writer by profession, and so there are other things that I want to clarify right at the start. There is currently, as of right now being the middle of May 2025, no white genocide occurring in South Africa. There are also no mass land expropriations currently being mandated by the state. However, given the socio political climate that is extant in South Africa right now, both of those things could change suddenly and without warning. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is the social climate and the kind of temperature around the discourse and how we communicate with one another in South Africa. Things here, from a social perspective, are not good. South Africa is currently extremely divided, and much of that division is actively caused and perpetuated by the political parties in this country. The ruling party, although not nearly as powerful as it once was, the African National Congress, seems actively determined to take this country down and to profit from its downfall. The reason I say that the ANC is not as powerful as it once was is that in the last national election, it lost a large chunk of its voter base and was forced to enter into what is known as the Government of National Unity with several other political parties in order for a parliamentary majority to be formed. However, the ANC is still pursuing what it calls its revolutionary agenda to transform South Africa. Now, if you know nothing about the history of South Africa, other than there was once a system of white domination known as apartheid, the idea that the ANC is going to come in and transform South Africa would, on the face of it, sound like a good thing. And if they had actually lived up to the promises they made, I myself would agree that they had done a good job. The only problem is that they have not. In practice, the transformation that has occurred has only been largely of benefit to those who are in political power or related to politicians. For the majority of South Africans, and to be absolutely clear, the majority of South Africans are black, life has not substantially improved. Poverty, crime, and general decay are the order of daily life in this country, and the decay has only been increasing as time has gone on. The reason why nothing is ever done about this is that the social decay that average South Africans live in and are forced to deal with does not affect the political class because they live the high life on state funds and are largely disconnected from the reality that ordinary citizens live in. That includes myself. Now, another thing I wanted to address is that because I'm a white guy who dares to have opinions about South Africa on the internet, one of the most common insults I receive, that is when I'm not actively being threatened with death and dispossession, is I am called a beneficiary of apartheid. This is said to me most often by strangers who've never actually spoken to me before and were only making assumptions about my life because they can see by my face that I have white skin. And so let me break this down. I was born in August of 1990, which means that I was 4 years old, or actually not quite four, but just about 4 years old, when South Africa, transitioned from apartheid to formal democracy, and the ANC took power. That means that I was not consciously aware of what was done during apartheid, and even if I had been, a toddler can't exactly fight a political system, can it? So then, to further address this, because beneficiary of apartheid is a particularly annoying insult given my personal history. I was educated at government schools specifically designed for people with physical disabilities. The vast majority of my classmates in those schools were black. Then, when I completed high school, I did in fact attend a private college to study journalism on the very coast of Durban, in a suburb of Durban called Umhlanga. The thing about that is, even though the college I attended was private, I was the only white student in my class. Every other student in my year was black. So if I'm a beneficiary of apartheid, I haven't really gotten much more that the average black person in my same social class couldn't get. That is why that insult means nothing and is really just an annoyance rather than any substantive criticism. And so, what I also want to talk about here is that there's this belief that, well, actually, it's a whole system of beliefs about white South Africans in particular. It seems to me that many black South Africans believe that the white sector of the population that remains in this country only does so out of stubbornness and an arrogant refusal to leave South Africa, and as they say, let Africa be for Africans, specifically meaning only blacks. Well, here's the thing about that. I do want to leave South Africa. I have wanted to leave for about 10 years. Only I don't have the resources or the facilities to do so. Now, I know that the aggressive people who will see this video will say, oh, Trump has invited you to claim refugee status. And yes, having looked at the criteria for refugee status, I believe I could meet those. But I cannot be an ordinary refugee. My disability means that I need a profound and constant level of care from people who know what they are doing in order to simply survive. So even though technically I could qualify as a refugee in the United States, practically speaking, that simply isn't possible. And then just on a moral level, I am very, very tired of being told that I am not African. Let me be clear about this. I have never been outside of South Africa's borders, not even once. I do not even hold a passport for international travel, and I never have. If I am not African, no one is. And I know that a certain kind of black person will utterly reject this and simply repeat, like a broken record player, go back to Europe, go to America, just leave. Well, to them I say, as I have said in the past, if you want me to leave, you either make me or you pay for it. And I don't say that out of bravado. I am fully aware that if large scale violence does break out in this country, I would be one of the first to die. My disability, along with many other things, makes it so I am unable to mount a effective defense of my own physical safety. So if violence does occur, I am one of the people who is in the most danger, physically speaking. But because of this, and because I have lived through various very unpleasant experiences, such as a home invasion and the large scale riots that took place in July 2021 following the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma, I no longer fear death. I also have less of a fear of death because of my disability. Once you've been disabled for as long as I have, in August I'll be 35 years old, by the way, death takes on a different meaning, and it is not as frightening as it probably is to physically normal people. After all, I am so disabled that the question becomes, what can you really take from me? I have lived a life with such struggle and difficulty that an average person who's never encountered somebody with a disability like mine can scarcely imagine what it's like to live this way. So when people threaten me with death for daring to have an opinion about South Africa online, you don't scare me, you just piss me off. And also, I know for a fact that the real killers, the ones who are happy to get their hands dirty and to get blood on their knives, aren't on Facebook or YouTube talking about it. They don't talk, they just do. So I see people who threaten death online as nothing more than barking dogs. There's another aspect to South African life that I've been thinking about a lot lately. There's this common belief, both inside and outside of South Africa, that this country is poor. And that is a lie. South Africa as a country is not poor. We have among the greatest mineral wealth in the world, and South Africa is one of the most naturally beautiful places on this planet. Even now, with all the socio-political chaos and turmoil, international tourists still come here to marvel at the beauty of South Africa's natural wonders. So no, South Africa itself is not poor. Rather, what happens is that the wealth is being hoarded by the political elite and stolen through corruption. Billions of rand every year, if not trillions, simply vanish from public funds. If that money had actually been spent on what it was intended to be spent on, South Africa would rival any first world country that exists. The reason that the average South African struggles with poverty and that malnutrition is a major problem is poor leadership by people who literally do not care if those they are supposed to serve die in shacks. That is the truth of life in South Africa. This country does not need to be poor. It is made so by the class of leaders that we have and the class of leaders that the majority of the population have continued to elect, despite the fact that they have shown time and again that they don't care about the well-being of their voters. They only care about the well-being of their own pockets. And so I really hope that you begin to understand my perspective. There is also a belief about white South Africans that we are all racist by default. But I've realized that what is called racist by politicians and by the media in general, for the record, the corporate media in South Africa is basically now just a propaganda arm of the government. They run the government narrative with almost unquestioning loyalty and never really dig too deep into political corruption, as journalists are actually supposed to do. So there's this belief that whites are racist by default. I want to be crystal clear about this. When I was raised by my parents, I was raised with the explicit understanding that if I ever mistreated anyone on the basis of their race or their sex, I would get a beating for it. Yes, even though I'm disabled, I wasn't spared punishment if I misbehaved. And mistreating somebody on the basis of their race was one of the worst things I could do. It is something I will not do to this day. But for a lot of black South Africans, that doesn't matter. They see the color of my skin and they decide, without ever speaking to me, that I must be an enemy and that I must be glad that they are suffering. I do not want anyone to suffer. I do not want anyone to be denied the opportunity to live up to their full potential. Because of my disability, I live in extreme social isolation, as generally speaking, South Africa simply does not have the resources to facilitate a meaningful public life for people with disabilities like mine. So I live in a very isolated sort of way. For instance, I have only left my home a few times in about a year and a half, and then only to have things done which were absolutely necessary, like going to the doctor, because my disability is such that I am at increased risk of medical complications. Because one of the things that quadriplegic cerebral palsy does to me is that if something goes wrong with my body, as would any other normal person, my body overreacts to it. So, for example, if I get a stomach bug, whereas most people would just feel a bit sick for a few days and then be fine again, my whole body can shut down because my muscles overreact, my balance goes away, and I lose all physical strength. That happened to me a few weeks ago, in fact. So it's not all sunshine and roses for someone like me. Contrary to popular belief, white skin is not a get out of jail free card in terms of existential suffering. And although I do not deny that many black people in this country suffer in unnecessary and cruel ways because of the state of our economy and various other socio-political factors. I take no personal responsibility for that suffering because I had no hand in it. I myself am not wealthy and, in fact, rely on monthly welfare payments from the state just to get by because my disability greatly limits my opportunities for gainful employment. And I think I've rambled enough for one day. I hope that you found something useful in all of what I've said. And if you didn't, too bad. That's all I've got to say for now. Look after yourselves, take care of each other, and as always, farewell.